Hello again, everyone. This is Chase with the Sober Minded Podcast. I am a co-host. So we had some of the same problems as we had before. I think we finally got them figured out. But for this podcast specifically, we are gonna have to just upload audio. We are gonna put it on to YouTube. It's just gonna be the audio with like a picture. So sorry for no video again. We didn't lose hardly any of our audio, so the whole conversation is there. So I really hope you guys enjoy this podcast, and thank you for stopping by once again.
All right, welcome back to the Sober Minded Podcast for episode 3.
Number 3.
Our topic today will be love. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. Up front, I think we'll just say, so the link we've been sharing to that RSS website, if you click on that link and it takes you to that website, you can stream directly from that website. So if you don't have Spotify or soon to be Apple or Samsung Music, all that, you can just stream directly from the website. So it's easily obtainable for anyone that's interested.
Yeah. We've just been having a couple people ask about it. So that is the easiest way to listen to it. I don't know if you can download it off of the website.
I don't know.
But it's there. So if you have a Wi-Fi connection or if you can listen on data, you can listen to it. So
yeah, and it's the full streaming, so you can even shut off your phone and it'll still play.
Yep.
So that works out well. Cool. Well, let's open up in prayer. Dear God, thank you again for the opportunity to come together and try to make sense of this world. Thank you for the wisdom that you've given us through the Bible and just wanting to have a relationship with us. I pray that you would guide us here, help us to put something out that you would want us to put out, and try to speak truth as well as we can.
God, obviously, thank you for another amazing day. Help us try to speak truth in the things that you need spoken truth into. This world has a lot to deal with, and I think there's not a lot of us speaking up. So we're here trying to maybe speak out as best as we can, and honestly, just follow you. Give it all for you.
In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So yeah, my topic is love. Chase had this idea because of the all-important Valentine's Day.
So for Valentine's Day, it's more of a topic that always kind of crosses your mind because you always see all the people posting and everything. And then obviously as a single guy, I've been single for the majority of my life. It's one of those things. It's like, oh, well, that would be nice. And then, you start thinking about it a little too much. So I had to get into the Bible because I needed something to comfort me, especially in my high school years. That was where it hit me the most. But I think the comforting love of Christ is kind of what we're going to try to hit on mostly today. And we do want to speak a little bit on like romantic relationships and then in friendships. So
yeah, and the topic of love is so important today because it's been so skewed.
Yeah.
Just skewed.
It's I mean, when you have acceptance for like the non-traditional love, and then you have CEOs saying, don't buy my product if you believe in traditional love, it makes it really, really hard for Christians, especially Christians that maybe enjoy those products. And as a Christian, I don't think I could support people like that.
Yeah, and we always just want to come back to the Bible and what God says about it.
Absolutely.
As much as it's often discarded as old and archaic. There is truth in it, and it is truth.
And it's not just our truth.
It is the truth.
Yep.
Yeah, that is good distinction.
Yeah.
We're going to start in 1 John 4. starting in verse 7. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. The one who does not love does not know God, for God is love. By this the love of God was manifested in us, that God has sent his only begotten Son into the world, so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. No one has seen God at any time. If we love one another, God abides in us, and his love is perfected in us. By this we know that we abide in him, and he in us, because he has given us of his Spirit. So, yeah, it ties back into what we've been saying of we're called to something more than just work. We're called to this love, and that love is at the top. The
Right.
love of God, the
Yep.
love for others.
Yep. And we kind of touched on that romantically, like with you and your wife, last couple of podcasts that we've done. But for us as Christians, it's very comforting to know the one that created us loves us so immensely that he constantly just keeps chasing us, no matter what sins we do or honestly, whatever we do. He loves us enough to, just constantly keep after us. And I think that's a great thing, especially for people that don't feel like they get as much love as they might need.
Yeah, especially in there's so many broken families. So that understanding of what is love and is there something that's real of unconditional true love,
And exactly. And I try to point people to Christ in anything I can. And obviously, like I said, I'm not perfect either. So if somebody asks me a certain question, I'll always just say, well, hey, I don't know, but I'm sure the Bible touched on it sometime. So
yeah. Would you mind hitting that damper? Just so that it's shut down. It's kind of warming up. Yeah, I don't know. How does it feel to you?
it's a little warm, but it's not horrible.
Okay. Sounds good.
So we did have another verse that kind of ties into John, and this is going to be in Ephesians 4. It's specifically verse 2. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. And what I was thinking off of that, and there's probably a multiple interpretations off of this one verse, well, off of these two verses, I guess. But I think it kind of ties back into the loving one another as God has loved us, just because, for one, that's what he calls us to do, and for two, he kind of made it a commandment. So
yeah, it does get interesting, like especially in the workplace of loving the other guys around you, where you want to keep that in mind, but you also, like, there is a dynamic of like, I love you, like I want the best for you,
right?
But I can't just let you push me around.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's also that not being acceptant, but also, how do I phrase that? It's not being acceptant, but also being as loving as possible. There's things that people can do that you don't necessarily accept, and you could say, hey, I don't enjoy that. I'm not gonna participate in that. But hey, man, I want you to know that I still love you, and I still be here for you. Like, if you came to me and asked, hey, how do I get rid of this problem, or how do I stop doing something? Because I think we've all been there.
Yeah, definitely. And on the work side, that helps a team be more efficient and get more done.
Right.
In a healthier manner of when you all are showing each other love and putting the other's interests above your own in a responsible manner. That puts you all on the same team. It makes you enjoy your work, enjoy your coworkers. It turns something that could be a negative of we're just here to work
Yeah.
and dang it, I got to put up with this guy over and over. It changes that from a bad thing to those around you can see, oh, wow, those guys really are efficient. They get along. They enjoy their work. They enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
There's something different about that.
Yeah.
It's not just this generic work image that you see everywhere all around of I'm just here to work. I put up with this guy because I'm here. That's that standard, that worldly standard. But by setting our aim to that higher goal, it's a witness to God.
Yeah. And in all honesty, like keeping that, it keeps the tension of working with someone else, because you're not obviously always going to agree with every little thing. But I think when you guys can come to a big understanding of, hey, this is like our project, this is what we got to get done. Like, this is what I would like to get done today. If it doesn't happen, oh well. Keeping that understanding between you and your coworker at all times, I think that helps relieve the tension, and it just makes a more fulfilled day.
Yeah, 100%, because you're winning on both fronts. You're winning on that physical front and also that spiritual, relational front as well.
Yeah. When it comes to like the workplace, I always see people struggling with that. Well, especially obviously as a first year, you kind of just have to grit your teeth at some things, and it's a little bit hard because coming from like my standpoint, at least, as somebody that's just been a first year for little amount of time, I've known the whole company for about 2 years now, and it's the people that really you do get along with and the people that you don't, and you still want to speak as much love and truth into their lives as much as the people that you do enjoy and you do get along with really well.
Yeah, and it does get difficult at times. 100%.
Oh yeah,
That's something that I have to be careful of. Is like I've been working in the trade since I was 16, so I've dealt with a lot of old grumpy guys that fling you a lot of crap.
Yep.
And I have developed a lot of I'll fling it right back. Yep. And I do have to be careful because sometimes that can get you in trouble. So it is finding that balance of I try to do it in a good-natured,
right? Just a fun play.
You have to get to know the person first. Yeah. Like, okay, will you find it comedic if I say this to you? Right. If so, okay, let's just have fun with it. But not saying it to someone you don't know that would rub them the wrong way.
Right. Yeah, and it is that is actually a form of love, just giving each other a little bit of slag here and there.
Oh yeah.
Just because, I mean, realistically, when you can mess around with somebody and you're still both like not having a bad time at all, it's pretty good because it's a fellowship. It is a form of fellowship.
Oh, yeah. And it's a sign of, like, that's what I tell, like, my journeyman. Like, I fling him crap, he flings me crap.
Yeah.
And I tell him, like, it's because I feel comfortable around you.
Right.
We have a good time together. Just neither of us is getting actually offended at the other guy. No. We're just flinging each other crap. It's a bit of a pastime,
Yeah. Well, so we wanted to touch, obviously, and we wanted to touch on just what love means, at least in just the workplace in general. But we also wanted to touch on what God says is love. And I think Ephesians 5:25 kind of goes through that. Josh had opened that up for us. Kind of tells us what God means by his love to us, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think if I start in verse 22 and go through that, it's a passage that everyone has heard 100 times, but often out of context or skewed.
Yep.
But let's take a look at it. Ephesians 5, starting in 22. Wives, be subject to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church, he himself being the Savior of the body. But as the church is subject to Christ, so also the wives ought to be to their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we are members of his body. For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is great, but I am speaking with reference to Christ and the church. Nevertheless, each individual among you is also to love his own wife even as himself, and the wife must see to it that she respects her husband. So, the way that I've seen this taken in different routes, but the way I view it when it says husbands love your wives as Christ loves the church is that sacrificial aspect where he loved the church so much that he died for us. And as men, we're called to that. We're called to, if it actually came to it, give up your life in defense of your wife. But that's not on a daily basis. Right. I forget who said it, but it stuck with me. They made the point that for guys, it's a lot easier in their mind to make that final sacrifice, because it's pretty easy to say, I would die for my wife, but it's a lot harder to make that sacrifice on a day-to-day basis on smaller things. That's daily sacrifice of like we'd already talked about, I want to just be alone right now, but I need to sacrifice that and give her some of my time. I need to sacrifice what I want to do to be there for her. Which that's way more difficult in my opinion. I mean, I've never had to give up my life. But that's something that in my mind is easier to accept than let's go do something. Okay, let's hang out right now, and so that sacrificial love can take on different forms, but it's what we're called to do.
And I think with God, that kind of comes in the many forms as of, obviously he provides, he is the great comforter. He is all these things to us. I think that's kind of where it comes from, out of Ephesians. And yes, when it's talking about, with your wife, of course, the little things is kind of, that can actually be a really big sacrifice sometimes, saying, hey, we're not able to afford, well, for my case in this instance, we're not able to afford some ammo this month for when you want to go shooting. Oh well. Yeah. Darn. I mean, you got to do what's best for your family, and so it is like those little sacrifices, and God kind of makes that clear to us that that's what He does for us every single day, and He did the biggest sacrifice for every single one of us, and that was all done out of love. Everything He does is out of love for us. And what we didn't touch on, which we should kind of touch on a tad bit, is the love from a distance. We talked about it a little bit last week, but
it was lost in translation.
Yeah, exactly. But the love from a distance, where you could be supportive of somebody, you could want that person to strive, and we kind of already talked about this on the job site. Like, hey, I'm support you. I'm gonna support you, and I'm gonna love you, but I can't accept what you're doing right now. That kind of same deal. Where, at least with a family member, like if say they're on drugs, and you'll be there the whole time and say, hey, I love you. I want you to know that you have somebody that is rooting for you. You have a reason to get off of these drugs. Now you just have to do it. And sometimes that's really hard, especially because sometimes the only way they learn that is from you excommunicating and saying, hey, I cannot accept you in my life until you clean up, because it is too hard for me, too hard for my family. And I think that is a very hard subject of love, and sometimes people don't want to see that side.
Yeah, well, and it gets a lot more blurry on where is the line of I'm trying to be there, I'm trying to help you, but if you're not reciprocating any effort into being better or helping yourself get out of that rut, at what point do I say, okay, I can't be devoting all this time because it's draining other areas of my life. So I'm going to take a step back. I still love you. I'll be here for you when you come around. I'll be rooting for you. But I got to take a step back.
Yeah, and it really just goes back to the sacrificing. You're really sacrificing, your time and your effort for somebody that might not be wanting to do the same for you,
Yeah.
I've seen it in a couple of my family members, and it is hard. It really is. It's hard to just say, hey, I can't sacrifice my time for you anymore. I can't come and help you with this or that. I can't help you with money because, maybe I can't make a payment this month or something like that. And it is really hard to touch on that subject and not really get into the how should I say it? The feelings of some people, because it is a really big thing, and it's constant in this world. Especially like you said earlier with broken families, it's a hard thing to touch on.
Yeah. And so maybe we'll just take a quick little side route. Something that has bothered me for a while that does pertain to this is the misusing love and placing self-love at that highest pedestal. You've been, at least I've noticed, you see it more and more in culture. Okay, like your feelings are the pinnacle. And if anything else is impeding that, if anyone else is impeding that, cut them out, because they don't deserve to have you. And that talking about this love here, that's exactly not the kind of love that we see repeated over and over through the Bible. That's not sacrificial.
Nope.
You're just trying to help yourself, and there is a degree that you need to be content with where you are. You can't not content, but understanding, okay, where I am, I'm not hating myself. I want to strive to keep going forward, but there is that degree. You shouldn't be hating yourself all the time. But oftentimes putting in effort to other people, in loving other people, comes back to you and makes you feel better. And I believe full-heartedly that that's why the depression rate is so high in America right now, is that total focus on self-love, where it's all that matters. And like we went into, Abby and I were getting a wedding present the other day. We were in TJ Maxx, and there was this journal that was like a self-love journal. And it said like my positive thoughts and on, which there is some benefit to that, but that's not what we're supposed to be putting at the top of our lives and the top of our goals.
There's definitely a good fine line with that. I get what you mean. The one thing I personally see with the self-love movement, it's like I was kind of explaining to you last night. It's really big into the gym culture. A lot of people, either they think really highly of themselves, they have like a big God complex, or they don't think of themselves at all. And it's really disheartening when you see a bunch of people that either aren't content with their selves, with who they are, or you see people that are, I'm the best person in the world, I'm never going to give anyone or anything or whatever a chance at being a part of my life because I don't need anything, and it's not what we're called to be as humans. Humans are made for relationship. Obviously the biggest relationship we can have is with Christ. And I think the whole self-love, when you're talking about depression and everything, that reflects back on people not necessarily either loving themselves enough or they love themselves too much, where if you love yourself way too much, you're never going to have a happy family. You're never going to have a spouse that, you really can really enjoy because, hey, I love myself more than you. That kind of deal. And on the flip side, where people are like, well, I don't love myself enough. I compare myself to, say, well, the whole Kim Kardashian movement where people really wanted to look like Kim Kardashian. And it's like, no, you were made a certain way for a certain reason. I think just being content, you don't have to necessarily be content where you're at, but knowing the specific reason that you're doing something. I think that's where I'm trying to hit a little bit more. Like for me, I didn't have necessarily that many problems with my body. I just really wanted to be stronger. So that's why I started going to the gym. And it wasn't necessarily because I hated my body. It wasn't that I hated that I wasn't as strong as some people. It was, I just personally wanted to be stronger. So it's really hard because it really touches on that subject within the gym community. And that's a big thing for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the Bible says, girls shouldn't even be wearing makeup.
Right.
Because he made them perfect. So really it's a sin if you're wearing makeup. So just keep that in mind. I'm totally kidding.
No.
Kidding.
But I mean, there is a point where it's too much of a worry on some females, I feel. Because realistically, they are very beautiful. They are made to be beautiful. And I think there's nothing wrong with it. I don't find anything wrong with makeup at all. But I do think it can get out of hand. And that's with everything.
Yeah, I agree. It, like we keep tying back to is what's the meaning behind it,
Mm-hmm.
Like you want to be presentable, you
right.
want to be presentable. You're representing yourself. You're representing
Yep.
God. But as long as that isn't your focal point, that's not the reason you're here.
Yep.
Is to bring yourself glory and,
right. Yep.
just benefit yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's a very good observation that you made about the gym too, because it does, I believe, goes hand in hand with the proliferation of this self-love thing,
right?
Where it's good to be healthy, but a lot of people are doing it just to make their image better,
mm-hmm.
to boost their ego.
Yeah.
Which you want to be fit, you want to be able to help others around you,
mm-hmm.
but we got to keep God at the top of our priorities. And that's what this keeps coming back to, is you see in culture that getting rid of God leaves a hole in you that you try to fill with other things, but it won't fill it up.
Right.
And it is sad when you look at the culture, and like you feel bad for these girls that you see are just depressed, that aren't getting the love that they can get from God,
Right. Yeah. And it's just, like I said, it's very disheartening. It makes you long for some people, and there's some people that you reach out to and you just know that they may not ever change, but you still got to reach out to them because you feel as if you have to do so. And like God said, like that is our job. We are to love one another, no matter what that means. The hard love aspect is also loving one another.
Yeah.
If I cut you off because I can't have that in my life, that is still trying to be loving to you, but from a distance.
Yeah. Yeah. And not falling into that trap of, I'm cutting you out of my life because you are just a burden on me. And you are just going to drag me down, and there's no hope for you.
Right.
You have to approach that from a loving manner.
Yeah.
Because I have seen Christians do that, where they start to run that risk of setting themselves on a pedestal, and
mm-hmm.
one bad apple will ruin the whole bunch. So we need to be separate. Okay, let's look at what Jesus did.
Right.
Was he spending all his time with the Pharisees?
Nope.
Heck no. He was.
He actually spoke out against the Pharisees most of the time.
And he had his core group of believers.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be surrounded by people who will lift you up and you lift them up. But he was also going out to others to be that witness.
Yep.
And once you take that bit out of the equation of, I'm just a sinner as well, I fail. It's because of grace that I'm saved.
Yep.
Once you take that out, it's real easy to run the risk of, I'm a Christian.
I'm better than you.
Yeah. And we do not want to fall into that.
Yep. The one thing which is funny, you mentioned his core group, it's pretty funny. If you look at most of his core group of Christians, a lot of them were not Christians before he met them. I think it was only Job that was a devout Christian. Think?
Like in the canon of the Bible?
Yeah.
I was meaning more like Jesus's disciples.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But I mean, just in general, I think, for a lot of what he did, a lot of people were not Christians before they met him. A lot. And, I'm not saying that, being a Christian before he comes back, we're not gonna. No, that's not what I'm saying. It's more of, it's kind of judging a book by its cover, to put it more simply, because a lot of people will just write people off for some things, and God says no. They still need you. Like, they still need me.
Yeah.
They need you to speak to them about me, because maybe they have something going on in their life. Maybe they just need to hear about me.
Yeah, and through that whole canon of the entire Bible, we see God working with people who make failure after failure, and and still God wants to work with them.
Yeah.
And at no point is it, you become a Christian and then you're instantly this holy being of I have everything put together. Life is easy.
Yeah.
I never will make another mistake.
Well,
like
you personally know that with my life. At least.
Well, all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I fail all the time.
Yeah.
And that's something we don't have it all figured out.
No, not at all.
We don't want to be putting off this air that we do, and that's why we're speaking to you.
Right.
We're trying to figure it out just as much as everyone else. So we fail, but God's grace covers us, and we're grateful. And it ties back to that love. You know, when you fail over and over, and God still is gracious to you, still loves you.
In fact, he chases after us.
Yeah.
It's not just, I love you. It's, I am coming for you.
Yeah.
Specifically for you.
Yeah. And it's almost, it keeps it more in mind when you fail. Like, oh shoot, I just failed again, but God still loves me. I ought to show that love to others around me, because I'm experiencing that.
Yep. We did have other verses. If you want to read them off, we can. I think they kind of do tie in a little bit to kind of what we're talking about right now, too.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good.
So I got 1 Corinthians 13. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4 through 5. And this is, I just had it. There it is. This one kind of pertains, I think, a little bit more to like the spiritual love aspect, I think. I haven't read it, so I need to read it.
Sounds good.
All right. If I speak in tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only resounding gong or clanging cymbal. So that one, actually, I lied. I did kind of read it, but this was the only verse I did read of that. So for me, that verse is pretty funny because it's talking about tongues, and we always got to speak in tongues, man.
No, yeah. I mean, that's the foundation of our Christianity is, can you speak in tongues?
No,
I'm kidding.
But I think it's funny because he's talking about my understanding of that, just that particular verse. I think he's trying to explain, like, if I'm speaking God's word, or if I'm speaking out towards something and I do not speak of it in love, then it is just as good as a loud explosion. I think that's kind of my understanding. I don't know necessarily exactly how he's trying to go about saying that. But like I said, I'm going to read through that more. And I started at verse 13, but I wrote down 4 through 5. So, if I have a gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, And if I have faith, then that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gave nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, and it is not proud. So I love that. I actually really love that because, like I said, you especially for Valentine's, you see all these people, and don't get me wrong, it's good to be, hey, this is my spouse, and I really love them. But I think there is a fine line there where you're.
Hello?
Well, that was weird. I think there's a fine line there where the love kind of does get to self-worship or spouse worship, I should say, where you're more of, oh, this person's really amazing and really great. But it's not like, oh, hey, I'm putting this person up here because I want people to know this is who treats me right every day. This is who provides for me every day, or this is who I provide for every day. I think it's a really fine line, especially when it comes to being romantic. You just have to be careful with. There is a certain expectation of love, obviously, going into a relationship. But when it comes to that, I think that's more of like a self-worship kind of thing.
I think that's something that as we need to keep in mind as Christian couples, as Christian husbands and wives. It's the two of us coming together to bring glory to God, not I'm going to bring glory to my wife, or she's going to bring glory to me.
Yeah.
It's we lift each other up to lift God up. Yeah. Because that's what we're trying to do. And yeah, that is an interesting observation of that spouse worship almost, or significant other worship we see in culture of someone made the observation that like mainstream country music now, there's a lot of songs that are worshiping the female. Like, have you noticed that? Like, Kane Brown has all those songs, and then like Dan and Shay or whatever, I don't know. But and it's like this worship of them, which is interesting because you see it's this like pendulum where 10 years ago and like or whatever in the 2010s there was that bro country of objectifying women, and then the pendulum swung, and now it's the worshiping of women, where as dudes you want to lift up your wife,
absolutely,
but what's the purpose of that? What's the meaning of that? Is to bring glory to God.
And I that's kind of where I was trying to get at, and you kind of explained it perfectly. Is it's more of a, I'm not necessarily doing this for my human spouse, but it is for us to be able to lift up God and show what God has given us as a couple. Yeah.
And I mean, marriage itself, it's the closest we get, one of the closest we get on this earth of experiencing like true unity, of that like spiritual unity, as is repeated over and over, like in that verse that I read, but also in Genesis 1, like in verse like in verse 22, we could start. The Lord God fashioned into a woman the rib which he had taken from the man and brought her to the man. The man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." And the man and his wife were both naked and not ashamed. And it's this spiritual unity. And I think that's an element that has been kind of left behind in modern culture of, we aren't just getting married to have two incomes in our household, It's this experience where we're called together to this beautiful intertwining of our spirits, our flesh. We are becoming one person in the eyes of God. It's, it's that image of the Trinity, We get a certain semblance of that we get to experience.
Yeah. The true form of being a human in God's eyes is that form of completion.
Yeah.
And it's funny because God talks a lot about completion in the Bible, and he makes that very clear to us that that is the main form of completion as humans, is the two becoming one. And yeah, like you said, it does become a really good symbol of the Holy Trinity, where it's you, your spouse, and God.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. No one else. You know, I think we have a disconnect in a lot of society where a lot of people, like you were saying, think it's just two incomes now, or it's I can afford a certain car now because we both make this amount of money. You know, and yes, those are good things taken in context. But I think when it becomes the only reason that you either have a spouse or move in with somebody, it's just it really goes back to that. Oh, we're being very humanistic now.
Yeah, and it's kind of, we've taken the byproducts of marriage and made them the basis for marriage, where you know, like the two incomes together, the two of you raising your kids, those are the byproduct of this marriage unit. And we've made those the reason for marriage.
Right.
And that's why when you have those things as the basis of your marriage, that's when it makes things very difficult, because you're missing that key aspect, and trying to keep that in mind, that we're part of something bigger. You know, it helps that day-to-day, that daily sacrificial love. You know, it's like, I'm not just sacrificing my time so that we can get along, so that we can occupy the same house and have a little bit more money. No, I'm sacrificing that time to love you, to bring glory to God, to come together and fulfill that calling.
Yeah. And like you said, it becomes the basis of marriage. Like you see it a lot of days now in culture. Well, you're pregnant when you're not married, which in my opinion, that shouldn't happen. But now you have to get married. Well, the marriage happens first out of the Bible. The marriage portion of that should happen first. And then obviously raising your own family, having a kid, are byproducts of you being married, starting a family. And yeah, like it is a very bad divide when it comes to Christianity. And that's kind of what we want to speak out into, is that when it comes to romantic love, it's a very hard subject, because we are called as Christians, obviously, to get married, and that's how we express our love, just in our family and in the things that we do. Like you guys, you built a house and you guys have a good thing going here. And that's really good. But there's some people, you know, the way that they start their life is, we have a child first, and then now we have to get married, because we have this child and we don't want them to be not wedlocked and stuff like that. So I think it's very hard, especially in this society, and it's really gotten accepted, or normalized, I should say, in today's society, because a lot of people, that's just how it goes. That's kind of just how everything is nowadays. But that's not how it's supposed to be.
No, and again, the disregard for traditional institutions, they aren't just set up that way so that someone can have dominion over the other.
Right.
You know, so for example, that passage in Ephesians of wives, submit to your husbands, husbands, love your wives sacrificially. You know, those are different roles. We have different roles.
Absolutely.
That isn't based on giving the man power over the woman. There isn't anything wrong with that structure when the two people, the husband and the wife, live out their roles correctly. It sets you up for a good marriage.
Yep.
There's a reason why God set it up like that.
Yep.
And again, when it's done correctly, when it's done incorrectly, where the husband forces his wife to submit but doesn't show her that love, that's incorrect. Yep. When the wife tries to take control, that's incorrect.
Yep.
Where at that point it becomes a failed experiment, just like anything else.
Right.
But when the two halves do their parts, that lifts them both up.
Mm-hmm.
There's reasons for these traditions. There's reasons for these institutions.
Right.
And, you know, when you both live those roles and then you have kids, that's setting your kids up for success.
Yep.
There's a reason for this structure. It's not just some power play.
Yep.
But people like to say, oh, it's just some power play. That's the only reason. So get rid of marriage. There's no reason. And then you have all these single parents and these kids being raised up with half of their parental structure.
Right.
And that's setting them up for a much harder road. But it comes back to there's that purpose for these traditions, and you can't just throw them out for the basis of throwing them out.
Yeah, right. And I think that kind of that also helps tie into what I wanted to say as well. Dating in the generation that we are in too. It's a very difficult thing because a lot of the culture has accepted that you just date to hook up, right? You're just dating just to have a good time for maybe 3 or 4 months, you know, do what you want, and then you break up, right? And I think, well, obviously that's not how it was made. It's not what it was made for. Dating is made for marriage. Going into any relationship romantically with the expectation of marriage actually holds you guys both on a higher standard of how you should be towards each other. And dating is basically that period of figuring out if it's going to work or not. But nowadays it's so skewed to where it's to the point where, well, like I was saying, it's like, oh yeah, we're just dating to have fun. I'm just looking for a buddy to go have drinks with. So I guess we'll call it dating, or we'll call it a relationship, or, you know, it's more of just a, how do I explain it? It's just a fun thing. It's a self-glorification.
Yeah. Yeah, it's become almost a hobby.
Yeah.
And that, so this right now we're trying to speak advice to that younger generation, to the kids that we know that are in high school.
Mm-hmm.
When you approach dating, keep in mind what the purpose of dating is, like Chase was saying, where it's not just some hobby. It's not just something you do because other people do it. When you're approaching these romantic relationships, you're wanting to look forward into your future as much as you can do that.
Yep.
From a high schooler standpoint.
Right.
And you're trying to figure out, is this someone who I want to set myself up with in life for the betterment of the world around us, for our betterment and the betterment of our future children?
Yeah.
Is that someone who you see fitting into that role well? It's not just some fun hobby you're doing. You're not just checking a list of, okay, well, that's a few months with that girl. Oh, here's a few months with this girl. Keep that in mind. I know it's hard as especially in high school. Like, we're both young enough. We know, you know, I think that's where a lot of divide comes from, is people like that are older than us, they don't quite remember what it's like when you're in high school and you don't have a job, you don't necessarily have that sense of purpose. You're just being pushed through this educational system, trying to figure out what you want to do, but you don't have the tools to know what you want to do yet. And I get it. It's really tough because you do want somebody by your side. You have that longing, but I would advise reevaluating, okay, what is the purpose? What am I looking for in a relationship long term? And the flip side of that, how would I be setting myself up for failure if I approach it wrong?
Right.
And the effects that will have on me and my future family, because those mistakes that you make travel with you through your life. And you can overcome them, but that doesn't mean they don't exist.
Right. Yeah, and it kind of that speaks into a little bit of Adam and Eve's situation too, where obviously that was Adam's longing, was to provide and protect and set himself up for, not until a lot of things happened, obviously, for a family, but But that was the thing, is Adam and Eve was made of his very own flesh, and he was called to provide, protect, and obviously it's speaking more on a lot of what goes on in relationships nowadays. But when the snake basically had talked to Eve, Adam should have been there and should have immediately shut it down, and that was on Adam. But it was also on Eve that she was talking to him in the first place. So it's like that great, like, hey, we have to both do our jobs. And if you don't set yourself up, especially as a young man in high school, trust me, I dealt with this too. If you don't set yourself up with the right companion to be able to necessarily do both of your jobs correctly or efficiently, then yeah, sometimes one wavers more than the other, and sometimes things happen. Not saying that anyone's ever perfect, but there's always a great option out there. You just have to find it.
Yep. Yeah, and waiting for that right person to come, like we said, will set yourself up, not only yourself, but that person up for success later down the road.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, when you're getting in these relationships in high school, are you able to, at that point, fill your manly role in that relationship?
Yeah.
You know? And again, I mean, a big part of the dating is you're trying to figure out if that person is the one that you
Right.
want to be with. You know,
Right.
there is that learning curve. You don't know that person right off the bat fully. You don't know all their beliefs right off the bat. Mm-hmm. So there is a bit of experimentation where you're just coming together in the dating and trying to learn more about each other.
Oh yeah.
But being able to, if it isn't the right fit, being able to step back and not falling into a rut of, well, I've been talking to her for a few months now, so we're basically married. So even though things are really going down the drain, I'm stuck now. No, just keep in mind up front, okay, I'm trying to figure out if this person is right, with my goals in mind of what am I looking for in a wife. Mm-hmm. And that'll really help you.
Yeah, and guys, figuring that out early in the relationship and early in your life, especially as early as high school, I think that will help you set up, even if you're not necessarily dating in your 20s like I am. It will help set up a lot of things down the road. And you just want to live a life that's full of God, and you want to give glory to God. So that kind of goes along with finding the right partner, finding somebody obviously that's evenly yoked with you, finding somebody that really wants to chase God with you, and that personally I feel like you have to find somebody like that. You really do, because it's not going to work out any other way.
And it's just setting yourself up for a much better marriage.
Thank you, sir.
Down the road. Like, I have an aunt who didn't get married till she was in her 30s at some point. I'm not really good with ages, so I always get them all mixed up. But she was, I believe, in her 30s. So way past the deadline of what people think you should be waiting. But she ended up with a great guy, and they have a great marriage that, as a teenager, I thought was fake. It was so good that I straight up thought that they were just putting on a face for everyone, because I thought that marriage isn't that great. Realistically, marriage is just you're putting up with someone, and when you're around people, you put on this face like everything's fine, but realistically, it sucks. Yeah. So when I would see them and they're just having a good time, it's like, yeah, they're just putting on a face, but no, they were truly enjoying each other's marriage, and that's something that was a learning curve with me with Abby, was I had a skewed view of relationship and marriage, and I was straight up waiting for something to go wrong because I thought things were too good. Yeah. But it turns out, no, when you get the right person, things are good, and it's a whole new level, and it's this term gets overused in our culture, but it's a blessing.
Yep.
You know, it's a straight up blessing, and it gives you that basis, but you don't just live on that basis. It's not just, oh, our marriage is good, I can just kick back. No, it gives you that baseline, but I need to be constantly putting in that effort. She needs to constantly be putting in that effort so that we keep rising together to bring glory.
Yeah, and like you said on, I believe it was our first podcast, the fact that you and Abby are so alike, that you get along so well, I think that plays a good part in having a good marriage as well. Obviously, that's not going to be the thing you stand on, but it does help. I feel like if it's somebody that you can easily talk to, and this is why I actually strongly believe in having a good friendship, or even a good understanding of the person before you get into a romantic relationship with them. I think because it will help you in the understanding each other part later down the road, because you can already talk to each other. You already know what each other, what you can do hobby wise that will help you connect.
Yep. And another thing to keep in mind as you're approaching these relationships is, let's just think it through. So you're never going to agree fully with somebody. Nope. Everyone has some variance in opinion. So you want to keep in mind, okay, how much variance am I willing to accept? And there are core beliefs that you will have that you should not sacrifice in a relationship. So like as a Christian, you should marry a Christian woman. And so what is the reason for that? Well, someday you're going to have kids. What are you going to teach those kids? You have two different views unless you come to some kind of compromise. And as a Christian, you can't compromise your conviction on, say, the deity of Christ, those fundamentals. You can't compromise on certain things. You can compromise on where they go to school, stuff like that. But so what are you willing to sacrifice? And another factor that pairs with that is, how well can you and that woman resolve inner conflict between the two of you? Because if you have a lot of variance and you cannot resolve conflict easily, that's a heck of a situation that you're setting yourself in, especially once you have kids, because then how are you gonna know what to tell your kids is truth if both of you have different opinions and you can't reach some kind of solution? That's really setting yourself up for failure and a hard time. So those are two things to kind of keep in mind is, okay, how much variance and on what topics am I willing to compromise? Because you have to compromise to some degree. And how well can me and this person resolve our conflicts? And that's a big one that Abby and I, we can resolve conflict very well between the two of us, not on simply our own merit. But it sets us up well, where like we haven't yelled at each other yet. That, I mean, you can say, oh, you're only married for 2 years, or there's people who say, well, that's a bad thing. No, we don't not yell at each other because we don't confront each other. We don't yell at each other because we can resolve them without yelling. Because we can view it through the light of, what's the merit of yelling? Like, what's our goal here? We're trying to come to a solution. And again, we don't always do that the best way. My personality, I get quiet. We're all just, I don't want to talk about it, so I'm just gonna, okay, whatever. And that's a bad habit. That's a bad trait that I have to work on and figure out. So yeah, that conflict resolution is a big aspect in those relationships too, where you don't, like you see these marriages where people are just yelling at each other all the time and taking digs, and it's just not fun to be around at all.
Have you ever seen the movie God's Not Dead, the first one?
I did like a long time ago. Came out.
There's we just rewatched it as a family not too long ago. Well, me and my mom did. And there's a situation in that movie it's very disheartening, where this Christian female is married to an atheist man. And it is that situation where they can't ever come to an agreement on anything. And it gets down to the point where obviously they split up in the movie. No spoiler. Well, it's been out since 2014. So if you haven't watched it, it's kind of your own fault. But they split up, and eventually, he realizes a lot of things after they split up, like, oh, hey, maybe I was wrong in this. And he obviously he was the professor of that kid that was talking about God. Like, they made it that whole semester about a debate versus him and this atheist professor. Right?
Is he the one? Somebody got hit by a car.
Yes, that was him. Yeah. So it is that same situation. It's because they had obviously different opinions on, I don't like to use this term, but we'll use it for the sake of complexity. Religion. They had different religious views that affected how they both, for one, spoke to each other, how they both dealt with like hardships in their relationship. And I think that is a big thing. Obviously, you do have to worry about who you get into a relationship with, because you're not gonna always gonna be 100%. Oh yeah, we're perfect 100% of the time. But the small amount of changes that you can make to, and I don't want to say have it easier on yourself, because it's not about ease. It's about the actual representation of what God has set on earth for us.
Yeah, and ease isn't the goal, but ease does play into that.
Right.
Into that goal of that unity, where when things are easier, you can work harder on other aspects to help lift that up.
Exactly.
When you're not quarreling over things that aren't as crucial to that unity, when you're bypassing that, you can focus on other aspects, which helps you get to that next level.
Yeah. Yeah, and that kind of explains it a little bit better. And it is very hard, and kind of tying that back into dating in the relation, or in the the situation we have ourselves on this earth. It is very hard. It will be like, and you probably already figured this out, it is probably the hardest thing as a teenager to go through. Finding the right one, finding someone, for one, that you can get along with, that you align with. Obviously, I would tell you start at church. And then you also have resources. You always have, maybe your parents are Christians. They probably know people that have other people the same age as you. And then your friends, try to keep a good friend group around you. Who your friends are kind of reflect who you are. If you're friends with, and not saying that God wasn't around people that were, as we call it, lesser. And I use that term lightly. I do not mean that as like I'm better than you. But just take a look at who you're friends with. If it's people that you don't necessarily want to see yourself, in a group with, then reevaluate that. Obviously, if you have good friends, they're gonna be there for you. They're gonna want the best for you, and they're gonna help you on that search. Now, however that goes, good luck. But it is a big thing. Like, I've noticed specifically, I always had not bad friends, but necessarily sometimes friends that weren't Christians, and that kind of didn't help play a part into what I was looking for as a man looking for a female. It didn't help because, well, for one, it was their opinion that they're necessarily not a Christian, so they had different opinions on what a female should look like, or a good female should look like for me, right? But I think that is the biggest thing you need to look for. You have to find somebody that has a good relationship with Christ, and you have to look for someone that my main basis is good relationship with Christ and someone you can get along with. There's a lot of things that you can kind of get over. Like if the person doesn't necessarily love country music, sometimes you just play a little bit less country music and listen to what they like to listen to. Those are the compromises that you were talking about, where you can kind of intermingle and switch a little things around that they're not really a big deal, and they may seem like it at first, but I feel there's some situations where you could really, as long as God is your standpoint in everything you do, a lot of it doesn't matter, like at all.
Yeah, like you said, where you are looking for girls, or where you're looking for a romantic partner, you could say, like, for the girl's perspective too.
Right.
That's kind of your baseline. If you're looking for a spouse at some drunken party, that's already giving you a baseline of who that person is.
Yeah.
You've already learned an element of that person.
Right.
Based on where they are, how they're acting.
Yep. Josh, you're mansplaining right now.
Mansplaining, man. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to hell, probably.
No, I understand, though. Like, it all goes back to, like, what you look for is, or where you look for especially is what you're going to get. If I'm going to a country concert, and not saying that all females at a country concert are going to be the same way, but you can kind of expect, like, if they're partying and drinking the whole time at the concert and cursing their mouth off, which I don't have a huge problem with, but, there's a point. That's who they are. That's what they're going to want to do on a weekend. Whereas if, say, you just like to go shoot guns every now and then, or go ride ATVs or whatever, those aren't gonna mix as well as you might want them to. And it is hard. I mean, it is really hard to find, and obviously you're not gonna find someone that's exactly the same as you. But I think finding that good balance of having a good friendship, I think, helps a lot when it comes to, a relationship romantically and a marriage eventually. Just because you do have that standby basis that you can work off of.
Yeah, and we're not trying to paint with too broad of a brush, because there is times where it's good to let loose with friends.
Yeah.
But we're just saying there is an element of however that person is acting at that moment that is a variable that is a part of them.
Absolutely.
So that is something to keep in mind.
We didn't get to touch on, like, we did a little bit, like the friendship aspect of love too. Did you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. Just kind of speaking straight out. Also, just so everyone knows, like, we're trying to be as correct as we can be, but we are just talking for hours on end, and it's all being recorded, and we're going to try to do our best, but 100% we're going to get certain things wrong. And it is a little intimidating.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be as precise with my words, but give us a little grace with that.
Right. And that's what I was saying is, I was actually speaking to my dad about that, and he's like, you're going to get attacked about certain things. And, it's just, it is trying to explain yourself and not trying to sound like, oh, I know everything, and not trying to sound like, oh, I'm better than people. It is really intimidating, because that is a thing on your shoulder that, especially when you're speaking about God, that you want to hold yourself to that high standard that sometimes maybe you can't 100% of the time. But obviously, like we're saying, we're just speaking. We are two friends trying to give our input on current situations, and especially with today yesterday we had someone come up to us and ask us a certain question, and we wanted to touch on that the best that we could, obviously trying to keep it related to God.
Yeah, in the element of this is 90% off the cuff. Like we have our outline and our verses that we're talking about, but 90% of this is just us speaking and thinking.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I personally feel like actually that's a really good thing for us though. Because it makes us not be complacent in where we are with our life.
No. Well, and it helps you be precise with your words.
Yep.
Which again we're gonna fail at, but it's that process of experimentation and learning.
Yeah. And like you said on the first podcast, we're learning. We're young. That's kind of our whole point of life is we're learning, and God is right there with us, guiding us along the way.
Yeah. So yeah, love in friendship. Oh,
sorry. What does it look like to you?
Well, I think you can take that sacrificial aspect and you can apply it to friendship as well, where if someone needs you or if you just want to give them a call to check in to support them, when we talk about sacrificial, it's not always giant sacrifices, but when you call someone, you're sacrificing a certain percent of your time.
Right.
But yeah, that reaching out, being there, being encouraging, letting them know that you're there for them when they fall or when they stumble or need a hand.
Yeah. And I kind of want to tie in a little bit, on another podcast that I like to listen to, The Order of Man by Ryan Mickler. I think you listen to him now too.
Yeah. I haven't for a few weeks.
Oh yeah. He touched on, like your time, talking about like, hey, I'm not going to say yes to something that I don't want to be there, you know? But yeah, taking that time and saying, hey, you know, I don't want to come to this birthday party that you invited me to, and just sacrificing the certain amount of like time. Like your time is important, right? And obviously you want to be there for your friends, but sometimes it's like, well, I got to get this done and I got to get that done, so I can't sacrifice my time. I'm sorry. You know, it is that other aspect of it too, where and they will take that as of, oh, he respects his time. You know, he wants certain things with his life, you know, and then they can rely on that, saying, oh, he's not just accepting invites and then bailing out on them last second, because that looks to them as if they can't rely on you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And being there for them when you can be there and showing that love and sacrificing that time, that helps reinforce when you can't be there, that you're not just pushing them off.
Right.
Because they know when you have the time, or if you place priority on their time or their well-being at that moment, they know that you do care about them and you're not just putting them off.
Right.
So it is that balance, that dichotomy.
Yeah, and like I said, that's the hardest balance to keep. For me personally, and you explained it a little bit too. I always have a hard time reaching out, and just keeping connected with the people I love. And like I said, you know, the time value thing, that's a really big aspect in a lot of friendship too, because a lot of your friends, like say for instance, if I accepted every invite that you gave me and then I just gypped out in the last moment, then you'd be like, oh, well, he doesn't value my time because he said yes and now he's not here. And that's more telling to you than if I just say, hey, I'm sorry, man, I can't come. I got stuff to do. I really hope you have a good time, and maybe we can catch up next week, shoot guns, have cigars, or go get a drink, or, you know, all these things. It really plays into the value of your friendship. And of course, if they are a friend to you, you want to value them and their time. Yeah.
And it ties back to that image of sacrificial love that Christ displayed for us with that ultimate sacrifice, but on a day-to-day scale.
Right. Yeah. And like I seen it kind of in our relationship as friends too, where I was like just responding and just trying to keep up. But that wasn't really what it was. It was, oh, now I got to respond. But when I thought about it, I'm like, no, I really value his friendship. Like, why am I only just responding, or why am I only accepting invites because, oh, I want to keep up with the friendship? It's more of like, I need to value him because he is a good person in my life,
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, and the same to you, like, and fostering that friendship helps to lift both of you up as well.
Right.
Because, the same deal that applies to marriage, of that unity, lifting God up and each other up, applies to friendships as well.
Yeah.
It applies across the board relationally. When you love a friend, you want to lift them up, and they want to lift you up.
Yep.
And that's beneficial all around.
Mm-hmm. And that's like the main reason, like we explained, that's the main reason we started this podcast is, for one, it's going to grow our relationship as friends. And for two, it's going to glorify God in such an amazing way that, not necessarily we'll ever know. Like you said, we're just here talking with a recording. We have these conversations outside of recording. So it's not like, oh, we're just putting on a front. It's more of, wow, this is something that maybe somebody needs to hear. Why don't we record it,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's taking that stand that is needed in culture of Christians voicing the truth.
Yeah.
Which that is something that I believe is lacking, especially in the mainstream sphere.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of counter truths are promoted.
Mm-hmm.
Not to discredit the people saying them. You want to keep in mind that most people are trying to do what is right. They just may not be approaching it the correct way, which is, there are aspects in our lives that we do that as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I want to speak on time as good as possible, because I mean, there are things that you have to value your time over some other things. And not trying to be like, oh, this is my time, so I can't let anybody else have it. It's more of like, I do need to catch up on homework tonight, maybe, so I can't come hang out. I'm sorry. That kind of thing. It's like, you value the fact that you want to grow your life and your potential family, and a true friend really will respect that, especially if it's done right.
Yeah.
I had a couple questions on here. One of them I kind of wanted us to answer. Another one is kind of more rhetorical. I learned all my setup off of my dad, so it's kind of how my dad likes to structure things. But
so take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, no, it's not great.
Kidding.
No, I'm kidding. But so I had these two questions. What does love mean in friendship?
You mean from like an application?
Yeah.
Or from a more
just in
like
general.
metaphysical?
Yeah, I mean, however you can explain that. What do you think?
Well, it ties back into that, like we've been talking about, the sacrificial, from an application standpoint, sacrificing time to call them, sacrificing time to go hang out when they want to hang out. And again, it's not always, it can sound like it's a constant, okay, I'll go be there for them today.
Right.
But it's also just to hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from the application side, sacrificing time to be there for them. And then, or I guess, what's your thoughts?
Well, personally, I just had it on the top of my head, but I can't really explain what I was thinking. But the aspect of you guys, specifically you and Abby, you guys kind of speaking in some things in my life, like, oh, hey, maybe that's not a great idea, or like just think about it before you do it, or, stuff like that. I think that's also a really good aspect of love and a friendship, because you guys are lovingly telling me, hey, that's wrong, know, or, hey, maybe you should just think about it. And then if you feel it's right, then, hey, that's you, and I think that really, I think that helps obviously grow the friendship, because then you can kind of not necessarily rely on the other person or the other friend, but kind of speak into them and ask them their thoughts on things because you trust their opinion.
Oh, yeah, that's a very good point, because it's not always just physically being there. It's bringing forth your opinion because, again, there's always merit in getting other opinions, because when you're looking at something in your life, you're right in the middle of it.
Right.
Whereas someone else is standing outside, they can view it from a different way. That
Right.
doesn't mean they're always going to come to a different conclusion. They might have the same conclusion, but they might have a different way that you could approach that solution.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really big aspect of just being a loving friend or even a companion. I mean, that's why there's two of you in a relationship, right? Is so one could have a different, maybe not a wrong opinion, but a different way of looking at it that the other person just didn't have. And they can kind of speak into that. Well, you guys probably do it all the time, you and Abby, where maybe you have a very strong opinion on something, and Abby's like, well, just think about it. Like, what if it was this way, or what if it was certain, what if it was the other way, or, like, especially when it comes to this beautiful, like, house that you guys built, there's probably things that you guys are like, oh, well, what if we did it this way? It might be a little more costly, but in the long run, it's going to look better, or in the long run, it's going to be better for both of us, right?
Yeah. It's not always a binary. It's not always I'm right, you're wrong, or you're right, I'm wrong. It's oftentimes also more gray, where it's like, you are right, but you can add in this element.
Yeah.
But you could view it from this angle.
And it's that it's actually what we just touched on too. It's that coming to a common ground in a lot of what you do, even especially as friends, actually. Because there's some things that, like, oh yeah, well, I don't see why that wouldn't work, but have you thought of it this way?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very, very beneficial. And that's why, especially when it comes to political topics, something I've been trying to work on is viewing the other side, and again, not just political, but also theological.
Right.
Viewing the other side not as in this opposition because they're evil, but because they could also be trying to do the right thing, but they're viewing it from a different way that you are. And there is some knowledge that I can gain from them, even if they're incorrect. Mm-hmm. There is some element that I can gain from their perspective, and vice versa.
Yeah. And that's kind of just what I've been trying to touch on a little bit. And I think you explained that pretty well.
Yeah. And I think that I know that's a big thing that's wrong with our political system of the red versus blue. And I'm on the side of right, and you are on the side of wrong. And there is, at some elements, a binary where truth is truth, a falsehood is false.
Yeah.
But demonizing someone who has the other opinion isn't always the right thing to do. So, like, for example, all right, we're going to get canceled. Abortion is bad.
Yeah.
Abortion is bad. It is murder of a child. Yep. But when I'm approaching someone who has a different view, instead of viewing it as they're in favor of murdering children, there are some people who might have a twisted perspective like that. But most people are viewing it through different lenses of, well, what about the girl? And,
Yeah.
And it's keeping that in mind. Like, this person isn't necessarily evil.
Right.
They're wanting good policy in their view. So let's work together.
Yeah.
Because you're not the enemy.
Right.
You just have an opinion that
is differing from mine.
Yes. Yeah. and again, not to discredit the truth, because truth is truth.
Yeah.
But we can approach it so much better.
Yeah.
And having that in perspective helps foster these good dialogues that will give us a better view of, oh, okay, like I didn't view it from that aspect. Let's add that variable into this equation, and what conclusion do I come out of it with?
Yeah.
Might be still the same conclusion, but I also have this nuance that I didn't have before.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think that's actually a pretty good, I think that touches on it really well. Just the varying aspects of, well, friendship, relationship, and even, I guess I could call it a relationship in between two different personalities too.
Yeah.
Because realistically, there are many situations I find myself approaching in a bad way, and I'm like, man, I could have approached that way differently, or I could have hit it on the head sooner, or I could have, and it is finding that not necessarily common ground, but finding that the right way to approach it, to where, like, say you are a Christian talking to an atheist, there's always ways that you can be accepting of what they believe, or not accepting, understanding of what they believe.
Yeah.
But you could speak into that and say, hey, I understand why you believe that. You've had certain situations that have pushed you out of Christianity, or vice versa, or pushed you into Christianity. I understand, and I am very glad that's the way you think. Let me talk into you and let me speak to you on why I think this is wrong. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. For one, it's never going to, I don't feel it's ever going to really change someone's opinion, but it makes them think. What I like to use is planting the seed. Some seeds that you plant don't ever grow, but it's still there, and people have to think about it.
Yeah, it's that parable.
Right, yeah. And if they think about it and come to the same conclusion that they were at before, at least they thought about it. At least they, took it and, like you were saying, put it into that equation. And, yeah, they came out with the same outcome, but they still, maybe later down in their life, they have to come back and reevaluate that same equation. And maybe they do come out of, that equation with a different understanding or a different viewing. Maybe they don't. And so it is that striking a good conversation between somebody, or a good understanding between somebody.
Yeah, and that big key element brings us back to that love, because even, we're supposed to, Jesus is love, we're supposed to be conveying that to all others.
Oh, yeah.
In that dialogue with, say, an atheist, we're supposed to be loving them. And our goal as Christians is to speak the truth and lead them to Christ, because at the end of the day, I want the best for that person, you know? And that unconditional love that Christ offers us, that applies to them too if they accept it. And so what's the best way to convey that? Where you said, like, some things may have turned them off from Christianity. Oftentimes it's Christians who are approaching them from a bad perspective, a perspective that isn't rooted in love for them, which is manifested in let's come together, let me try to give you some knowledge. It manifests itself without love as, you're wrong, you're going to hell, and whereas, well, maybe that's true. But is that the tactful way? Is that the loving way? Is that the most beneficial way to convey that?
Yep. I think that touches that really, like I said, that hits that on the head pretty well. Well, I wanted to get into this second question, and this is more of like just a rhetorical, and we can speak on it too if you want. But why is love for us? And I know that's a very harsh sentence. I came up with that like last night. But kind of what I meant by that is, why was love created for humans in the first place? Me personally, I feel like it's a unity And it is what God shows us. So it is what we're supposed to show others.
Yeah. And when you experience that true love, that's the highest form of good that you can experience. Whereas the highest form of good you can experience from a physical perspective of, say, I built this beautiful thing, that falls short of a unconditional love that you experience. Where I think love is the highest, what's the term? Just the best thing we can experience.
Yeah.
You know, it's the pinnacle is that love. And that's why we should be striving to show that to others and experiencing it both from a spiritual level with God and from those around us.
Yeah. Well, I think we had a great conversation.
I agree.
That was obviously, there's a lot more aspects of love that necessarily we didn't bring up, but they could come up in a future podcast. But I do think we did touch on a lot of the more important aspects of it. And when it comes to love, it is, like I said, it is a very, very hard topic for some people. For me, for a long time, actually, not necessarily the friendship aspect, but more of the romanticized love aspect, because obviously, like I've explained multiple times, I've been single for the majority of my life. So I've never really, I like to explain it as I never gotten it right, but that's not the right term, because it's not about getting it right. It's about, I don't know, finding the correct love, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And striving to approach it in that right way.
Yeah. Well, this has been a good podcast, I think.
I agree. No, yeah, we started out with our topic and it flowed very well through the whole conversation. And I think we did a good job in tying it back through our whole conversation.